It says New York discharge. This documentation that you're looking at right here that I'm zooming in on, this is the documentation that you receive upon paying your mortgage in full, right? And then the bank gives you the home outright. You get what I'm saying? You own it outright because the loan is paid for in full, right? And as you can clearly see here in the New York discharge, meaning now the home is officially yours and it's out of our hands, mortgage dated 20th day of May 1983, made by Robert James and Letitia James, Big Tush, his wife. And you can clearly see right here, and I will zoom in even more. It clearly states his wife. And I'll even do you one better. Let me take a moment to take myself down off the screen and look at it's very clear that you are your father's wife, at least on paper. Okay. It's clear and it's right there for all to see. What's going on, everybody? Thank you all for joining me today. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel, and most importantly, please make sure that you are following me on Telegram at TD Media Group to help circumvent social media censorship and shadow banning. And with the introduction out of the way, let's get into today's news. And today we are headed back to New York once again to speak on who Letitia James, aka Big Tish, aka Big Tush, the Queen of New York, until that federal indictment comes down. And trust me, it will be coming down. Just be patient. We have to speak about her again because it looks like she's been busted once again. Allegedly, I believe, I assume. It's looking like here that Letitia James may have engaged in tax evasion as it pertains to property taxes for a home that was formerly owned by her father, that on the mortgage document says that her father is her husband. It looks like on that property, she's been evading taxes and evading taxes for over 10 years. So I want to get into that now. Man, the evidence against Big Tush just keeps piling up, doesn't it? It just keeps piling up. But before we jump straight into this here, I got to take a moment to pay it forward. Give me just a second to pay it forward to my man. Shout out to Paralegal Institute of Washington, D.C. He shouted me out on his video that he did on Letitia James, I want to say a couple of days ago, because he was inspired by my video and decided, man, let me make a video about this too. And I'm just paying it forward right now because the same thing happened to me. I was just perusing through YouTube. I came across this video that you see here, worst fraud allegations yet. I watched it and I said, you know what? Hit the record button, TD. Let's go. All right. So I wanted to pay it forward to you since you paid it forward to me, man. It's the right thing to do. So shout out to you, bro. And if you're not subscribed to Paralegal Institute of Washington, D.C., he makes really good videos. So go ahead and check him out. But now let's get back into the potential alleged, you can say, tax evasion of Big Tush, right? So let's get into it right now. Red flags in Letitia James' handling of her father's estate demand another investigation. Let's get into this. Letitia James, the New York State Attorney General, has presented herself as a champion of legal integrity, yet documents filed under oath in her late father's estate proceedings in 1999 appear to present legal problems for James involving property law, mortgage representations, and taxation requirements. Letitia James' father, Robert James, died on January 15th of 1986. 13 years later, in 1999, Letitia James filed a petition in Queens surrogate courts seeking to administer his estate. Nothing wrong with that on the surface, right? But we'll see where the issues come in. Watch this. The only asset was a small townhome at 11404 Inwood Street in Jamaica, Queens, a property Letitia had purchased with her father as husband and wife in 1983. That is nasty, diabolical, and criminal all at the same time. In sworn estate documents, get this, Letitia claimed that the property was held as tenants in common, a legal classification that would require the probate court to transfer her father's share of the house to Letitia. Follow me now. The property would not pass the heirs of the descendants by operation of law, James wrote in her affirmation, because the descendant held the property with the undersigned as tenants in common with no right of survivorship. Now, here's where the problem comes in. That distinction was crucial. Unlike joint tenancy, which passes ownership directly to a surviving party, such as a spouse, tenancy in common requires probate court to transfer the descendant's share, right? This designation implies joint tenancy with right of survivorship, meaning that ownership would have automatically passed to Letitia upon her father's death in 1986 without need for probate. So now you're seeing where the conflictions are coming in, but it gets worse the more that we read. But if we're just going to take a moment to pause here to take in everything that I just stated, when the initial home was purchased, it was purchased with you and your father as husband and wife. Ugh, disgusting, right? But obviously, at least in my opinion, that was done for a more favorable, mortgage interest rate, right? That's pretty obvious. Once again, in my opinion, it's pretty obvious, right? But then when your father passed away, and it was time for you to fill out some sworn estatement documents, you stated that the property was held as tenants in common. Well, you wouldn't make a statement like that if you were indeed married to your father, because if you were married to your father upon his death, it would automatically transfer to you the property, right? So then why would you state in other sworn documents that now the property was held as tenants in common, meaning that you didn't have ownership of the property? We're going to see why in just a moment. Let's keep reading. In 2000, despite her tenants in common probate filing in 1999, Letitia James sold the Inwood home with the original ownership listed as Robert James and Letitia James, husband and wife, anyways. This raises the question as to whether James benefited from tax or other financial advantages by selling the property as husband and wife, even though she inherited her father's interest. Further complicating the picture is James's 13-year delay in filing for probate. New York probate law expects reasonably prompt administration. Though New York imposes no statute of limitations on filing probate or administration proceedings, courts expect petitions to be filed within a reasonable time, usually within a few years of death. Letitia James' 13-year delay is extraordinary and unexplained. A long delay implies possible concealment or misuse of the estate. Now, let's get into how that can be done and what possibly may have been going on in that 13-year period of time that Letitia James essentially did nothing, right? As it pertains to taking legal ownership of the property. Let's get into that right now. If Letitia James collected rent or claimed homeowner benefits during this period, this may amount to a breach of fiduciary duty or, at minimum, unauthorized possession of estate assets. Because remember, she stated in the above documentation that we read earlier in sworn estate documents that the property was held as tenants in common. With that being said, she didn't legally acquire ownership of the property till 13 years later. So in theory, the property should have just been standing there vacant. I'm pretty sure that it wasn't, though. I think we all can come to the conclusion reasonably and logically that that house didn't sit there vacant and empty for 13 years. This would lead you to think, were you collecting rent on that property? Because if you were doing so, you'd be doing so unlawfully because you technically don't own it. So how could you be loaning the home out, renting it out, renting out the rooms, collecting rent, right? Makes you think, what were you doing that entire time that it took you 13 years to actually acquire the home legally? And in between that time, what were you doing with the home? Questions have to be asked and investigations have to be held. Let's carry on. The publicly filed court estate documents reveal that no estate taxes, federal or state, appear to have been paid or filed in the 13 years between Letitia James' father, Robert James' death in 1986, and her eventual filing for estate administration in 1999. Oh, so were you're trying to avoid paying taxes? It looks like it. It looks like it. Possibly while collecting rent at the same time. Because once again, I personally do not believe that that house was sitting there vacant and empty for 13 years. I don't believe that at all whatsoever. The article continues to read, at the time of Robert James' death in 1986, the federal estate tax exemption was $500,000. The New York State estate tax exemption was $108,333. Letitia James's stated valuation, $105,000 in gross value minus the mortgage, would have placed the estate below both thresholds. However, tax attorneys caution that even non-taxable estates may require to file estate tax returns, especially when real property is involved. Yet, Letitia James explicitly affirmed in her 1999 petition that there were no federal or state income or estate taxes payable by the estates. Oh, really? I beg to differ. It looks like, based off what we're reading right now, right? James also failed to indicate that a Form 706 federal estate tax return or a New York ET 706 state estate tax return had ever been filed, or that any taxes were paid in the 13-year gap between death and filing. If estate taxes were in fact owed, this omission could constitute a violation of federal or state tax law. Filing zero documentation over a 13-year period is highly irregular and may amount to administrative non-compliance at best and willful evasion at worst. Let's take a moment to pause here, because once again, on the original mortgage document, it states that you are husband and wife, you and your father. Ugh, right? If indeed you were husband and wife, at least on paper on your mortgage document, then upon his death, that home immediately became your property that you owned, which means that you owe 13 years of taxes that you did not pay. All right. But in order to avoid that, going back up here, is that why, once again, in sworn estate documents, you claim that the property was held as tenants in common, meaning that, hey, my pops passed away, but I don't own this house. I don't own it. So essentially it's in limbo. He's deceased. He can't pay taxes. Nobody owns it. So hey, I don't know what's going on with that. It's not my issue. But it is your issue, and it should be your issue, especially when we're looking at documents literally right here. Look at this here. It says New York discharge. This documentation that you're looking at right here that I'm zooming in on, this is the documentation that you receive upon paying your mortgage in full, right? And then the bank gives you the home outright. You get what I'm saying? You own it outright because the loan is paid for in full, right? And as you can clearly see here in the New York discharge, meaning now the home is officially yours and it's out of our hands, mortgage dated 20th day of May 1983, made by Robert James and Letitia James, Big Tush, his wife. And you can clearly see right here, and I will zoom in even more. It clearly states his wife. And I'll even do you one better. Let me take a moment to take myself down off the screen and look at it's very clear that you are your father's wife, at least on paper. Okay. It's clear and it's right there for all to see. So this house, as far as I'm concerned, and you can see here, this letter is dated April 17th of 2000, right? When the official New York discharge went out. But in my opinion, as far as I'm concerned, because you are on this mortgage document as husband and wife, upon your father's passing away and you being his wife, you immediately assume responsibility of the property. It's yours. You own it. Technically, it's yours because you're his wife. So it transfers to you automatically. That means you have 13 years of taxes, property taxes, state and federal, that you have not been paying. And it's time to collect. It's time for you to pay up in more ways than one, with a lot of interest as far as I'm concerned. This is crazy that this woman has always been corrupt. You're not going to sit here and tell me that this is just oopsies, because her lawyer, which was Hunter Biden's lawyer, his line of defense for all of this foolishness, as I've discussed numerous times before, is oopsies. Everything was a mistake on two separate mortgages, mortgage documents, which were two separate homes, right? Letitia James and her father are on those mortgage documents as husband and wife, two separate homes. Oopsies. Now, it was just my defense in court is oopsies. The home in Virginia, you stated and you documented with your signature that home in Virginia was going to be your principal resident, despite the fact that you were the AG of New York. And by law, your principal resident cannot be in New Jersey if you're going to be the AG of New York. So what's going on with that? It was just oopsies. It was oopsies. It was a mistake. It was oopsies. Your Brooklyn property, where you refinanced that home, I kid you not, about 9 times. And I'm not exaggerating. You refinanced the same home property about 9 times. And on the mortgage documents, you change the number of units every time. It's a 5-unit building, a 5-family dwelling. But for numerous reasons that financially benefit you, every time you would refinance and remortgage this home, you'd put a different unit count. You'd put 4, you'd put 3. She's even put 2 and 1. That is crazy when it's clearly a 5-unit building. You would label and place different unit numbers every time, except for the number of units that were actually in the property, which is 5. Oopsies. It's all oopsies. And apparently this right here is oopsies as well. No property was paid. No taxes were paid on the property for 13 years, despite the fact that I'm my father's wife. So therefore the home actually does belong to me. But then I decided to play games and say it didn't belong to me when it was convenient, so I can avoid paying taxes for 13 years. Oopsies. Oopsies. I'm not going for that. And I'm curious to know in the comment section, are you guys going for it? Because I'm not. I'm not going for that at all. Let's carry on. By declaring no tax obligations with no supporting documentation, Letitia James effectively concealed the estate from federal and state tax authorities for over a decade. The Robert James estate file which included his death certificate that appears on page 36, stands as more than a simple probate proceeding. It serves as a document bridge between Letitia James' early financial dealings and the integrity questions now surfacing amid broader mortgage fraud and campaign finance allegations. In an era when ordinary citizens like you and me, who have no power, face penalties for missing tax deadlines or improperly valuing assets, the idea that the state's top prosecutor may have dodged scrutiny for over decades demand serious attention. And I 100% agree. It does. This needs to be looked into thoroughly, because if this was you or me, regular folks who have absolutely no power, no political cachet, and a lot of us are just strapped for cash. A lot of people out here, you're what is it called? Oh, I'm brain farting right now. I don't want to edit this out. Jesus Christ. Your net worth, all right, is tied up into your home, right? That's what's being called. If I remember correctly, it's being called house poor. I think somebody told me once, right? Your net worth, it sounds like a lot, like I'm worth $500,000. Yeah, no, it's all tied up in the home. If you sold the home, you'd have that money, but you're at your house poor, right? You got a home, but all that money that you make goes to mortgage, utilities, and everything else. And after that, you're strapped for cash, right? I say all that to say we regular people out here struggling, right? With no political cachet, no clout, no nothing. We can't get away with this kind of stuff. But shockingly, or maybe not so shockingly, the Queen of New York, Big Tush, she's just been getting away with this stuff for years and years and years and years, for decades, even before becoming the Queen of New York as New York's AG. That is unbelievable. My mistake. That is very believable. It's very believable. And I'll leave it there, ladies and gentlemen. With all that being said, that does it for today's news. Please hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel. Share this video on your social media platforms. And do not forget to follow me on Telegram. The link to my Telegram is in the description box below and pinned in the comment section as well. Thank you all for your time. Until the next video, peace and have a great afternoon.